Good afternoon, everyone. So welcome to our webinar today. We are pleased to welcome Dr. Larry Kennedy to promote, to start a talk about quality management and then to promote the quality management training scholarship offered by the Quality Management Institute. So Dr. Kennedy has provided consulting services to businesses and nonprofit organizations since 1985. So Larry's career started as a systems engineering junior engineer in Apollo spacecraft operations and flight crew training, where he first practiced quality management disciplines. Now, with over 30 years of quality management experience in aerospace business and as a management consultant and trainer, he has a broad perspective on management reform processes and the development of public and private collaborations. Larry was also mentored by Philip Crosby, the world-renowned quality management executive, who partnered with him in reaching out to the nonprofit world. So welcome, Larry, and please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Raid, and Margaret. It's really good to be back with you all again and looking forward to a third cohort this year. This is uh, an exercise of enjoyment for me because of the opportunity to make new friends and spread out a little bit in this new digital world with friends all around the world who have an interest in quality. And today I'm going to work from some slides that were familiar to those of you that have been through the course. And the topic is leveraging human intelligence to produce trustworthy and safe super systems. I'm very much involved now in learning more and more about AI and how to use it, working using ChatGPT and some of their advanced modules and what have you. And I'm pretty much intrigued by the fact that people that are in systems engineering or in IT work as an engineer or as a developer are going to be more and more dependent on AI, and not just for writing code effectively or this or that, because some of that is questionable, but for having the ability to leverage their human intelligence. Exactly. All of the digital things that we've been given to work with and all of the supplemental systems we've developed like Agile are supposed to leverage what our human skills are, our intelligence, our experience, the maturity we have or don't have, depending on how many years we've been doing what we're doing and how many challenges we've overcome. And so I want to talk a little bit about the connection between what we're doing as a human being and how we've developed our own vocational certainty versus what we can do with the technologies and the systems that are provided to us to leverage that so that we can have very safe systems. And we mentioned in this particular slide pack super systems because so much of what we interface with now, whether it's a drug store and the many stores within a chain or some kind of online purchase we make. So many things that we have now in terms of receiving products and services are part of a super system that might very regularly reach all around the world into many countries and districts. It's not like we have just the same options as we've had a year or two ago. These things are changing literally by the day. Uh, One of the things that supports the quality, the delivery of quality products and services, or the primary thing, is a quality culture. Is that the people that are operating the company, the organization, whether it's nonprofit or for-profit, they all want what the customer wants or needs and or expects. That's the way they define quality. It's fulfilling the customer's requirements is some of the language, or conforming to requirements. And that would be what the customer wants, what they need, or what they think they need, or what they're expecting. And they should be able to have reasonable expectations of feeling safe and secure with our product or service. In other words, and of course, in my consulting business, I found that the services that I provided were often disruptive. but they were disruptive in a positive sense, in that we would disrupt a process because we had found a weakness, an error, a cause of errors, or something like that that we wanted to get rid of it. And to do that, we had to disrupt and sort of re-engineer the process a little. But the outcome was to fulfill a solution that we knew we had after we had studied it. So reasonable expectations of feeling safe and secure are always trumped by actually being safe and secure. And we should have a perception of trust and reliability in the promises. In other words, the things that you tell us that you're going to give us with your product or service, that perception of trust and reliability should be a positive one. And it always comes from the repeated delivery on the promise. I like to review for a moment the technological super systems that we've observed in my lifetime. And I go way back beyond Saturn, the Saturn V in the top left-hand side there. I worked on Apollo. I worked for the 12 engineers. They were called the super specialists at the time. They were engineers slash scientists. And those 12 persons ran the spacecraft program. They made all the final decisions for checkout and launch. And I always say this, you maybe heard me say it before. I didn't make a single decision that affected launch, but I did a lot of things, fulfilled a lot of tasks that could have and did in some way affect those things. And so one of the things we've talked about a lot over the years and learned through repeated experience is everybody counts, and everybody carrying the good attitude and trying to fulfill the requirements of our customers is a very important attribute of success. And you can see all of these different things that have changed in public transportation, in computing, in healthcare, in satellites providing communications for us around the world in an instant, telephones, and so on and so forth. We've seen a lot of this over, say, 40 or 50 years, but now that's accelerating. Now we have rockets that can land on a little barge out in the water, or can land on the ground. And there wasn't a technology that would allow that kind of fine tuning until the recent years. And even though the technology was there needed to be this interface, this leveraging of the human intelligence for those things to be created and to become operational. The whole objective of working in these super systems to bring quality is to enable average people to perform at high levels in a complex system. In other words, you can't find enough people to work at genius level, but you can enable them and leverage average people into high, very high levels of quality and conformance to complex requirements by providing the right technologies. We talk about doing things or acting according to a fixed plan or system, being methodical or systematically working. And of course, that's something that everyone can learn. What we want to do, though, is get beyond that to verifying inputs and validating outputs and applying rigor and due diligence in a way that we can get beyond that into what becomes systemic collaboration. So, I have a module called a drugstore, and it's online or this or that, and you have a module called a delivery system. And I'm the recipient of those two modules working well together and with their technologies integrating properly so that when I order something from the drugstore online, it manages to be packaged forward through a system of delivery, and I get what I'm supposed to get because those two systems are integrated. They have the right amount of connectivity. We noticed a long time when I was first being trained that you could be working systematically, but fail systemically when your own module integrated with the other one. You look like what you were doing is going to work just fine until it's challenged by the requirements of connectivity. So we start out being systematic and due diligence and rigor. Then we want to make sure that we can conform to a level of systemic collaboration. And that's what all of these major super systems, both in the retail world, in the world of technologies, and so on and so forth, that's what they've achieved. and once these systems are stabilized and implemented, they are very, very effective and can be scaled to enormously high numbers. Over the years, I've experienced it through my various reputations in the market because I've worked with nonprofits and for-profits. I've worked with government agencies and NGOs, and in public and academic and private situations. There's always something just over the horizon and near sight of a new method or technology with lots and lots of promise. And sometimes I remember we were talking about time to market, and everyone was talking about, well, gosh, we need metrics, and if you can't measure it, it can't be done. Well, that's not actually true. You can do things and not measure them, but you don't know how well you're doing until you start measuring them. And so, performing at high levels in a complex system is great, but failure to properly apply metrics is a real problem in today's world. And most of us that have done consulting or collaborated with another organization to get integrated will find that there's all kinds of documentation, everything from policies to strategic plans and so on, uh, collecting dust on somebody's desk or up on a shelf somewhere because we're so busy trying to integrate to the latest technologies that we forget that the most important thing is to build up the human resource, the intelligence, the institutional knowledge, so that we can leverage, once that's in a good place and it's stable, then we can take the technologies and leverage that into high performance. This is a study, the results of a study from the Standish Group. It's called the Chaos Manifesto. Some of you may have read this before. You can look it up on the web, and it indicates the reliability of agile development methods versus waterfall. Now, this is a discussion that was going on very seriously, I guess, about 15 years ago or so, maybe 20 when agile development was first, being discussed. And I remember I was teaching a course, a webinar or a session with a major client, and someone in the group said, "Well, gosh, we use agile development here at whatever company because it's over 3 times more effective than waterfall." And I thought, well, my understanding is that waterfall is just multiple iterations of agile with the right kind of accountability and feedback built into it, theoretically. So that seems strange to me that it could be 3 or 3.5 times more effective, because that would mean waterfall was really, really bad. And, so I did some research and I found out that Agile, for all sizes of projects, has a success rate of 39%. That means on time, with all of the functions as per designed and within reasonably close to the budget. That's not a really good performance level. If I had walked into the systems group back in the Apollo years and said, "Hey guys, I've got this wonderful idea and it's reliable up to 39% of the time," I'd have been run out of the office and blackballed from the industry because of the foolishness of such a statement. But what this really proves is it's more about the culture and process being the roots of all of these problems, because the basic policy of Agile is almost identical. There are 12 organizing principles for Agile. You can go to Deming or Crosby or almost anybody in the quality world, and they're going to be very similar to those 12 organizing principles, which are all about due diligence and rigor and the cultural implications of this or that, and some ethics and what have you. So it's not what we talk about, it's what we do. I was teaching in a university up in New England, in the United States a few years ago, and I was waxing eloquent in my speech, and right in the middle of my speech, some lady stood up right in the middle of the audience and waved her hand, and I thought, well, she's bold, and maybe she's got a great comment or question, and I recognized her and said, "Ma'am, would you like to say something?" She said, "I just realized something." And I said, "Well, what's that?" And she said, "You want to share it with us?" She says, "Yeah, she said, there's no big deal here. This is just common sense." And I laughed and I said, is that all you have to say? And she says, yes. And I said, you may be seated. And I said, first of all, I just want to tell you, I agree 100% with you. But the magic is not in the knowing and saying, it's in the doing. And she said, I said, do you have another level of understanding there? And she goes, oh, yes. She says, we hear this kind of thing all the time. But I said, but it's the underlying disciplines, the underlying application of the policies, the underlying application of what I call it the Quality Management Institute, the 8 attributes of a quality manager or a quality culture. And so these statistics can kind of just slide right by us. Here's some interesting statistics on the value of the human resource. And these are a little bit aged. Um, I read this poll every year, the Gallup poll on the state of the American workplace. I've been studying it since I think 2016 or 17. And at that time, it said 70% of the workforce, and this was at that time just the American workforce, either are disengaged, actively disengaged, or hate their jobs. And I thought, well, that was 2017. That explains some things to me. It explains to me a little bit about how I'm treated sometimes at the kiosk in the mall, or sometimes how when I go to the local hardware store to pick up something that I'm kind of just dismissed as here, and I particularly experience this when I'm on the line online with somebody and they've got their headset on and I've got my phone to my ear, and I kind of feel like they're just trying to get me off of their screen and check off another service task completed. So the interesting thing about that is about 34% at that time were actually engaged in the work and carrying most of the load in a high percentage, 70% or more of the workplaces. 51% or thereabouts were in transition from being engaged and actively involved and feeling positive about work to disengaged and disillusioned and then disengaged. And the last fraction, which would be 15 to 17, these all fluctuated 1 or 2 points every year, and they still are within 2 or 3 percentage points all these years later. The last 15 or 17%, depending on the year, were so disengaged and actively disengaged that they were deliberately undermining the process. And that means that they were deliberately dead-ending customers to a solution that wouldn't work and getting them off their screen and avoiding accountability through ways that you find often in agile development circumstances. Those were stunning numbers. Now, like I said, I've read it every year and I have the copies of this are free online, the Gallup poll annual study. And over the years, they varied 1 point here and up and down, but not a lot. And in Europe, uh, they're slightly higher the numbers of disengaged. It's in some years it's as high as 80%. Um, and so that surprised me. I thought they'd be pretty much the same all around the world, except maybe in some of the Far East and Asian countries where, like Niels, you visit Japan on a regular basis. There's a high level of discipline in their working marketplace and so on and so forth. And so they kind of scratch their head and say, how do those people get away with that? Uh, you know, um, Here's another one that's amazing. Now, this explains to us why the human is so important and why we may be putting our money in the wrong place. When we hire somebody who appears to be ethical, who appears to be at least intelligent and able to learn and willing to learn is more important than able to learn, that you can put some money there and get a lot of leverage. You can get a lot of return on investment. The American Institutes for Research during the same period of time back around 217, 218, said that a 4-year college graduate, and this in the United States, with a bachelor's degree, 4 years, 50% of them lack the math skills and the reading proficiency to pass a literacy exam. Now, that meant that if you gave them a paragraph and asked them to read the paragraph and then tell you what the topic was, they could not accurately do that. Now, these are what had their 4-year degrees. And if you handed them a menu and said, here, tell me how much a sandwich and a salad would be, add 12 and 7 together without a pencil and paper, how much is that? They couldn't do it. If you ask them to answer this equation or complete this equation, a can of beans is 10 ounces and the can is $1. How much is it per ounce? They couldn't do it on paper or in their mind, either one. Now, I don't know about you, but if I've got a whole house full of those kind of folks trying to produce a product or service, there are going to be lots of errors in communication because of the need to be able to write things to one another. And there's going to be a lot of errors because of the inability to make reasonable calculations. And I don't know which is worse. It's the, which is worse because it's one of those chicken and the eggs things. What do you fix first? And I like to say there's no sense applying digital solutions to a culture like that because all it's going to do is multiply the amount of errors you have. And it's also going to give them, as Agile development does, all due respect to the wonderful nature of Agile if properly applied, it's going to give a lot of people with low ethics, low um, engagement, low motivation for production, ways to hide their well, I'll just say incompetence or malfeasance, however you want to call it, but it's non-productive and it produces errors that 34% of the people are going to carry. So there's the problem. And if that problem is ignored, it doesn't matter if you have 34 out of 100 really good programmers, developers, people with design architecture and implement these things. If 60 some percent of them, what is it? Yeah, 66% of them are in this range of being disillusioned and disengaged and or part of that smaller part that's undermining the process. And the people that suffer are, first of all, the customer, and second of all, the company itself, whether it has shareholders or it's a nonprofit, it will eventually collapse under the weight of this. So the challenge is education. I like to refer to Bloom's taxonomy, and Bloom's taxonomy is a sort of hierarchy of learning. And Dr. Bloom said the first thing you need to do is recognize and recall facts. And that maybe you need to memorize. And sometimes in particular in educational process, if I say, would you memorize this sheet of information? People say, oh my gosh, you want us to memorize? I say, read it and remember it, whatever. I don't know how you do it, but if you don't know that 2 + 2 = 4, and if you may recall, we had to memorize that. When I was a kid, we had flashcards. But you have to memorize certain things and not depend on this or on a little computer sitting on your desk or a calculator over here somewhere. And if you have to rely completely on the digital world to acquire and retain facts, there's something very, very vulnerable about that. So the first thing is you need to remember facts. The second thing is you need to understand what those facts mean. That requires discussion or referencing or so on and so forth, then you need to know how to apply them. Once you're at that place and you're practicing the application of the knowledge you have, then you can begin to analyze and evaluate your experiences and make judgment about the formation of ideas and do some really great things. Before long, you're creating. Well, in higher education in the United States, I had several discussions like this, and they would say, well, you're one of the things that you're emphasizing, which we think is a mistake, is that you want to verify at the lower levels that they've got the facts. I said, yeah, it's called testing, and it should be graded because I want to know, particularly if the person's going to be a surgeon or an airplane pilot or something, I want to know they get really, really good scores on the facts. I want them to know how those systems work, biological, mechanical, hydraulic, electrical, whatever. I want them to know how all that works. And I want them to understand it well enough that they can apply it effectively. And they would say, well, no, we are really more interested in how this educational process affects their feelings and sense of well-being and their perceptions of hope. And I remember having some discussions with him. I said, no offense, But I don't care about any of that until I know they have the facts, understand them, and can apply them. And then when they start to apply them, they can start to analyze. Now I want to know how they're feeling. Now I want to know what they think. It's essential for me to know their perceptions because not only can I help them to improve, but I can get improvement ideas from them because of their proper application of facts. When we flip this around and try to socialize learning to a point to avoid the pressure of learning, to avoid the pressure of acquiring facts, we're really undermining the quality of any process we put together. And that's what all those other statistics I just shared with you prove. Watts Humphrey is known as one of the fathers um, of quality in the whole world of digital development. He said one principal problem of educating software engineers is that they will not use a new method until they believe it works. And more importantly, that they'll not believe the method will work until they see it for themselves. I thought, wonderful. I thought that's great, except it's not true anymore. A lot of people will take a new technology that has the promise of performing at a high level and try to implement it without those other things in the human resource being at a high level of performance. So you're not leveraging good, you're leveraging bad. You're not multiplying good, you're multiplying bad, things that are error and defect related. So I really respect what he did. And I think he was at Carnegie Mellon in Pennsylvania. But I just wonder every time I'm involved in a discussion or some consulting activity, how true that is now. Jenny Rometty was the CEO of IBM, and she said, you know, all these things that we've got going, and I've done had lots and lots of discussions with people at IBM and presented at their seminars many times. You know, AI and quantum computing. I'm just totally fascinated by quantum computing. I'm totally fascinated by AI. I'm learning so much about how to use some of the different modules like ChatGPT. I really see that it's going to add 5, 6, 7 years to my productivity, not because of my physical things, but there's just only so many things you can do in a day. And it's like a special assistant once you get the knowledge of how to learn it. And I had to go through a lot of work to understand the misgivings and the misunderstandings about how AI work. You know, it's really great. But as she said, all of these things are wonderful, robotics and all of these implements that we have, but they're supposed to be augmenting human intelligence. They're supposed to be leveraging human intelligence. And when you stop developing the human intelligence and the human character in the workplace, you have problems. And when you don't have an approach to systems thinking, you're going to have these gaps and errors take place. So you can see that technologies don't operate in a vacuum. They operate in a complex system of both systematic thinking, collaborative integration, and also an overall knowledge of how things work. Uh, Systems thinking is an approach to problem solving that considers and evaluates facts and events as part of an overall system, and the decreases. It's supposed to decrease the potential for solutions that fall, and also for those things, those unexpected outcomes that you just didn't see coming. And I say that happens sometimes because we're looking through a straw. So you see this guy looking at the world and the facts and circumstances. There's a lot he's not seeing because he's not stepping back from it. And so I say go through Bloom's taxonomy, get the facts, blah, 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 then get on there and then get a larger, wider scope. And you're going to start to understanding so much more, and you're going to have much more of an effective process. So we're talking about systems thinkers view the whole world and its people as interactive part of a super systems. And so all the great super systems, they honestly do sometimes compensate for very low levels of competence. But those people that are functioning at those lower levels of competence or confidence or reliability are put in places where that can't harm the overall process. Now, that sounds very discriminatory. Well, yes, it is. I'm making judgments on a routine basis, and so are you, about people's confidence, and reliability. You make those decisions all day, every day about whether you go back to that store again or whether you use this product or service again. So, super systems are the reasonable pairing of competent, well prepared humans and technologies to improve outcomes. I like to remember this Kasparov effect, Gary Kasparov, the famous chess champion. And he took on Big Blue, the IBM computer, in a chess game and won, beat the computer. Well, the the IBM people came back and said, "Well, we'll fix that." And so they reviewed every chess move they had in the series of games they played, reprogrammed their computer, and they came back and just easily, closely beat Gary. Gary says, well, two can play that game. He says, so all I need something is to rapidly aggregate my options for me. So I'm going to create my own program in my own computer that will take my theories and my potential moves from my own thinking and my own application of the various styles or systems. I forget the word now of playing chess. And he came back and beat the IBM team badly. And what he did was prove our point. It's the human intelligence, it's the institutional knowledge, because people are less and less able, and based on these statistics, to produce reliability based on technologies alone. The determinant factor for trust and safety in all super systems is human. Here's a quote from the Prime Minister of England back during World War II. And he's just talking about, I'm never going to give up. We'll never surrender. I've got a plaque on my shelves over here that was given to me by, it was Phil Crosby's wife. She had it on her desk. It says, never, never, never give up. Fight to the death to get it right. Um, don't be satisfied with something that absolutely can be fixed. But when you find, not talking about perfection, and don't get caught in the trap of perfection. But when you know there's an error there that can be solved, solve it. We had at the Quality Management Institute, and maybe one of the students in this group, previous cohorts here experienced it. We had a video that at the very same spot, so just like 2 minutes and 51 seconds, something like that, would freeze. And we disassembled all the modules. We disassembled the capsule that they were in. We re-rendered everything. We could never find it. We had an expert group outside try to solve the solution with all kinds of different computers, Apples and PCs and laptops and all kinds of different browsers and different internet service providers, and they could not find a solution. And so finally, because I got involved in it, I thought, gosh, I want to solve this problem. And finally, I looked at it one day and I took my little digital communicator here and I clicked on it and pulled the video on the timeline about 10 seconds and let go, and it worked. And I said, I know this is ridiculous, but we've spent way too much time and energy and money on something that we can't find a solution for. And we've done everything we know. So we'll keep using this until we find a solution. Until then, click on it, move the timeline 10 seconds and move on, And so sometimes about once every 6 months, we'll get a support request that says this video, and we kind of laugh and say, geez. And so we'll interact with them and say, can you give us some information about how it happened? In the meantime, click it and drag it. But can you fill out this information? What was your, what browser did you use? What's the version number? We kept trying to find some a variable. What the interesting thing is, it went like 2 years with nothing, and then suddenly it was back again, but only with one. So there are certain things that never, never, never giving up doesn't make sense. There has to be a point of that. So that takes care of the part of it of the due diligence, the rigor, so on and so forth. And then our own President Kennedy said, as you know, the famous declaration, I believe this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth. Safety is inextricably connected to high quality products and services. It really should be the presumption that our product or service does not, first of all, harm anybody, whether it's in the medical field where that's more famous or in any other area. And when I worked in the Apollo program, one of the things they first taught us was remember safety, safety, safety. And that came right after the Apollo 1 fire, where they drifted just a little bit in their emphasis on safety, and two or three very strange variables came together at the same time and created a catastrophe. So you can see there's the due diligence and preparation of the human, and there's the technology. There's a hardness and a willingness not to back up or fail. Technologies and technologists have to be in balance. Decision makers and implementers have to be in balance. Work processes and work culture has to be in balance. And so I say it's time for a journey back to digital reality, and just back up a couple of steps from our total reliance on digital solutions to things. There are two important quotes, one from Phil Crosby, who was my mentor way back, and that was, the quality is the result of a carefully crafted cultural environment. That's hard to say, carefully crafted cultural environment. It has to be the fabric of the organization, not a part. In other words, there's not just a quality department or a quality person. Quality has to be part of everyone's thinking and the way they do business. It has to be the fabric of the organization, not just a few fibers running through the fabric. And then W. Edwards Deming, in his 14 points, and you should look it up online, we don't have time for it now, he emphasized the need to create constancy of purpose. That's kind of being fully engaged. Constancy of purpose for improving products and services, and that it should be supported by a vigorous program of education and self-improvement for everyone. You see the consistency in the quality message and the methodologies. I mentioned before the 8 attributes of a quality culture, which as I wrote in my book on keeping the promise, a work ethic for doing things right back in 2005. We just rewrote the Systems Engineering Handbook for INCOSE, the International Council, where we emphasize that, and on behalf of INCOSE. And their comment was that I was, as I have read these things, written these things, that I was leveraging Deming's mandate and the work of Crosby, and that's true. I was adding to it based on current world culture that we're dealing with. But what they have said and what they have done, it's not new to me, and it's not new to them. It's restated truths and realities in each generation. So the 8 attributes are what create a high performing work culture, and that we can take and attach digital multipliers, digital leverages to scale them up, to make them more and more testable, more and more readable in terms of feedback of metrics and so on and so forth. These are the 8 attributes, and you'll have access to the video and to a slide pack about this, of a quality culture made up of quality people. And you can see they have very specific definitions. They're a measure of. For instance, zero defects attitude, a measure of our commitment to keep our promises and to initiate systems with the reliability goal of preventing even one defect from reaching our customers. But we define it very often in our training that we're not talking about perfection. We're talking about what I just explained. Never, never, never give up. Always be ready to find a solution. Keep gathering data when it's relevant. But remember, you've got to keep your promises to the customer, and you have to weigh out the balance of those things. This is another graphic that demonstrates how these things are in balance. You can see on the right-hand side is about people. On the left-hand side is about people, and on the right-hand side is about processes. You see administrative skills and so on and so forth. On the left-hand side, it's all about the organizational values and your personal values, professional values. And so these things have to be given attention. They have to be worked with. And that's why we developed our training program and our certification. We have a certification for systems engineers. We have one for IT, which is what you're going to be invited to participate in. We have them for clinical researchers, for business and nonprofit, and so on. But the basics are all the same, and that is we're dealing with people and the development of their capacity to work with technologies and build out this kind of complete culture that has the balance of skills and values and creates what often is called delighted customers and a stable workplace and real profitability. You know, almost all things are possible. And what we're trying to do is help average people and get them properly paired with the right tools and processes in an intelligent system that can do great things. Thanks for listening.